everybody in the medical profession is, you come see me when I want to see you, not come see me when you're available. Meet the patients where they are instead of making the patients meet you where you want to meet them. That kind of sparks the customer experiences.
Hello guys, welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets, where I'm your host, Austin Hare, and our guest is jcoke. Justin is the CEO and founder of 7 to 7 Dental. They were founded in 2008 in San Antonio, Texas. They currently have 8 locations, and they've been growing exclusively through de novo, which some would argue is the hard way. So, Justin, thanks for hopping on the show today. How's it going, my man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Austin. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you've been a busy man, hopping all over, going to all these post-COVID conferences. And it's good to tie you down, but yeah, so I want to get to know Justin a little bit more. I want to know, like, who is Justin? Like, what was early childhood life like for you? You know, did you have any entrepreneurial experiences early on? Did you do anything that was maybe a little bit different than what some of the other kids were doing at the time?
So I didn't really think about it at the time, but as early as I could push my dad's lawnmower up and down the blocks near our house, I would push it, and I would ring people's doorbells and ask them if I could mow their grass. And you know, I grew up in a middle class neighborhood. Everybody mowed their own grass. You never saw the landscaping trucks in our neighborhoods. And so I would ask them if they wanted me to mow their grass, and they said no. And I told them I'd do it for $10, and they're like, yes. So I used to mow a lot of grass, and so I didn't really think about it as an entrepreneurial thing. I like to have my own money. And I was doing that probably from the time I was about 9 or 10 years old, and did it with some friends as I got a little bit older. But you know, we mowed grass, and you know, obviously as a kid, I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. I just knew that I liked to have money of my own, and so that's what I did.
Well, money is definitely a motivating factor. So when you said that you had other friends, I mean, were you just partners, or did you structure it like an employee-employer? Like, what did that look like?
I was not that sophisticated. And none of my friends were either. So we, you know, when they were available and if they had yards that they did, they would ask me to come. We'd split the money. And if I had yards to cut and wanted a little help, then we would do their yards and split the money. So it was more about kind of economies of scale there, of getting it done faster, a little bit less money, but getting it done a lot faster. So it was.
And so, is this what you did? Like, okay. And did this carry you through middle school and high school, or did you ever end up getting other jobs?
Well, my mom is very much a security-based individual. She likes consistency, and it was always about having a job and a good job and all of those good things. So as soon as I turned 15, she said, "You're going to go find a job." And I said, "I don't want a job. I'm doing okay." And that wasn't an option. So she took me around to all the local grocery stores, and I would go in and get applications. And then, of course, I didn't want to fill them out, but she would sit at the kitchen counter with me and make sure that I was filling them out. And then she took me back to drop them all off. And I ended up getting a job as a bagger at our local grocery store. It's a local grocery store chain called United Supermarkets, and so I did that for a couple of years.
Wow, that's a long. I thought you were going to say a couple months.
No, I did it for a couple
years. Is a long time.
I was a bagger for a few months, and they actually promoted me too. I was 15 when they hired me, so I had to get the general manager that hired me didn't realize that, so I had to get parental authorization to work there, which wasn't a problem because my mom's the one that took me there to get the job. So more than happy to sign that. And then I became a cashier / stocker. So I stocked the shelves and rate people up, and did that for a couple of years. And then I moved into the restaurant business. I started off.
Oh, that's cool.
Started off as a cook. So I knew my way in the back of the kitchen. I prepped food. I grilled food. You name it, I did all that. I was also a line cook. Did that for a while until I was old enough to start waiting tables. So I did that until I was 18. And then as soon as I could start waiting tables, I started doing that. And you know, funny enough, is waiting tables is a bit entrepreneurial in itself, because you have to do a lot of things to ensure that your paycheck is where you want it to be. It's not, you know, I made $2.13 an hour, and not a lot of living happening with that. So you have to learn ways to be very creative in making sure that the people that you're serving are encouraged to leave you as much money as they can. So I did that all the way through college, and graduated from Texas Tech University with an advertising and marketing degree.
So do you think, what did you learn in that time of being a waiter? Because I had a lot of jobs, in middle school and high school. I mean, as soon as I turned 14 and I was legally able to get a job, I did. But I never was a server. I never went down that route. And so I think it's interesting to listen to other people talk about it. But you mentioned it's kind of entrepreneurial because you got to figure things out. So it sounds like maybe there's a couple life lessons that we could pull out of there that maybe helped you as you progressed on your road in the future.
Yeah, I didn't understand why more people didn't wait tables that were my age, especially because I made more money than anybody that I knew, and they all worked, part-time jobs, making, $7.50 an hour or whatever minimum wage was at the time, and some of them made a little bit more, but they didn't work for tips, and all of their money was exclusively based off of what somebody else wanted to pay them for their time. And I didn't really like that idea. I didn't like working my tail off, because that's kind of how I was raised. It didn't matter how much you were getting paid; you just gave everything you had. And so I realized real quick I didn't really like that, and I didn't understand why more people didn't wait tables, because I would make $300 a night working from 4 to 10,
wow,
and somebody else working from 4 to 10.
What is that hourly rate then?
From 6 hours, so making $50 an hour.
So you're making 50 and your peers are making 8.
Yeah. That's why I didn't understand why more people weren't doing it. But I didn't necessarily realize that there's a personality trait that goes with that as well. Because I never really talked about money with my peers at the restaurant about who made what, but I know that there were plenty of them that didn't make much because they sure talked about it a lot. They're like,
what is the difference then? What did you do that enabled you to go from like $2 an hour to $50 an hour based on the tips versus some of the people that worked at the restaurant that were struggling with money? Like, were you systematic about it? Did you take notes, or was it gut feeling? Like, is it, you know what I mean? What do you think that it was?
I think a lot of it had to do just with personality. I've got a pretty big personality. I'm not afraid to talk to strangers. I've never been afraid to talk to strangers. I like to use humor with people that I don't know, because I think it lightens the mood and it loosens the pocketbook. So,
yeah.
it made people's experience more enjoyable, rather than just having some no personality person just walking up to their table on a regular occasion. But along with that, you do have to be very disciplined, and you have to pay a lot of attention to the needs and wants and desires of your table. And one of my things that I recognized very early is give them what they want before they ask for it. And so
that's a good tip.
Yeah, I mean, when somebody has to ask for a refill on their drink, it's already too late. And that sounds like such a small thing, but when they have to ask for a refill,
that's true.
It's too late. And
yeah. I mean, there's a number of restaurants I sat at, and like, you just sit there. I drank my water early, and it's like 15 minutes, and you think they're gonna come back, and like, yeah, by the time because I don't like to be pushy or bothersome, which I imagine most patrons are like that. So if you're asking, it's like, yeah, it's been a long time. So that's a great trait.
And so that always helps. I mean, when and you always have to put the orders in a timely fashion so people get their food in in their expected time frame. So just being on point, being proactive and things like that really, I think, helped my time and helped me be more successful in my time as a server. So you did have to be very organized. You had to, you're working multiple tables at a time. You had to remember who needed what, who did what, who asked for what. I think one of the biggest things that customers got frustrated with is when they ask for something extra after you bring food, and then, hey, can I get some ketchup? Can I get this? Can I get that? And their food's sitting there getting cold while you're not bringing it. So making sure you stayed on task all the time during your shift was really important. Because I worked with mostly young people, with mostly college students that I worked with, and I saw a lot of them using it more as just a opportunity to have conversations with their friends at work rather than actually doing a really good job. And those are the ones that complain the most about not making any money.
Yeah, they're not working at all.
Exactly.
You got enough time to complain, but not enough time to refill waters.
Exactly.
So what lessons do you think you learned from that you took over into your your full-time career or your vocation?
Well, so coming from waiting tables, it really gave me a lot of confidence with people. So I've never been shy, but that gives you a tremendous amount of confidence talking with strangers and new people. And I was originally trying to get a job in my field of study, which is in advertising, and I did not realize that doesn't pay anything. It pays very little, or at least it did when I was
Yeah.
looking. And the offers that I was getting from the local firms, I would have been taking a significant pay cut from waiting tables, which didn't resonate with me. I didn't understand how I could go to a professional career and make less money than working as a server and a student in college.
Well, they call it the golden handcuffs, right? Because it's like the money's good, so good, even if you don't like it, it's hard to get out of.
Sure. So I didn't stay. I made sure that I was not going to get stuck in that rut. They actually asked me to manage the restaurant on several occasions. The last one that I worked at, and I refused to do it because I was afraid that might happen. The golden handcuff thing. And so I made sure that I left right after I graduated. But I did have a job. But I took a job in sales, and because I kind of equated that to waiting tables. And you get a base salary, but it's barely livable. And I'm a big shared risk kind of a component guy. So if I'm going to share the financial risk with you as an employer to pay me very little, I want a lot more on the backside if I perform. And that's exactly how waiting tables was. And so I figured sales might be a really good route for me. And so I went to work for AT&T as an account manager right out of school. It was a pretty easy transition. I didn't have any desire to go sell telecommunications. I mean, I knew all about it because my dad worked for AT&T his entire career. My mom was working at AT&T at the time. She worked there for probably 17 years. My brother ended up working for AT&T, my aunt, my uncle. So it was a family affair, really. So I kind of didn't want to do it for that reason, but they offered me a really good offer before I graduated, and I was like, oh, what the heck, we'll give it a shot.
So, yeah, that's cool. How long were you there for?
It was the longest 17 months of my life.
So it wasn't what you thought it would be.
It wasn't the company, it was my boss. So I went to work for two people that my dad had worked with in the past, had a lot of admiration for them, and they were really great people. And within 3 months of me working there, both of them had taken promotions out of my division, and unfortunately they brought the two worst people they could replace him with, or at least I felt. And it was, I've never in my entire life since then met somebody that is such an oppressive micromanager in my life, and that makes Sundays very depressing when you've got 5 days of working with somebody that you just don't want to be around.
So I think it's tempting for people to look at the end result, like in somebody like your case, right? Like you own 8 dental practices and would be considered very successful in our society, and think like, oh, it's too late for me, or the odds were just against me, or I never got lucky, right? But was there anything that happened early on, like that you did very intentionally, and maybe in terms of even like reading different business books or self-development books? I mean, I know one of the things was a lot of guys were sitting there complaining, and you were out figuring out, like, how do I be proactive to make sure that I get the most amount of money from these customers when you're waiting tables. And so, like, during that time, aside from those couple intentional decisions, were you studying anything? Were you reading books? Were you trying to do anything to sharpen your mind that would, because Darren Hardy talks about the compound effect, where it's like, at the time, like, you're making a little bit more money, but your lives really aren't that different. You know what I mean? But then you keep doing the right things over and over again, and maybe it's not in the next year, maybe it's not the year after that, but in 10 years' time, you're going to see a big difference that's almost, uncatchable. And then in 15 years and 20 years, it becomes even different. So, was there anything like that you started doing at an early age, you think?
It's really funny, Austin, is I'm not a very proficient reader. Books make me sleepy when I start. It's a crazy thing, but Audible was a lifesaver for me. So about 10 years ago, I just became a ravenous reader, but it wasn't it wasn't reading that got me into the path that I am. I started reading after I started this company, and I've read hundreds of books in all fields, from finance, management, leadership, sales, blockchain, whatever it may be. I'm always reading something.
Are you an investor in cryptocurrencies?
Yeah.
Nice. Same here.
It's a very scary roller coaster.
Oh man, it's been nuts. Hey, but at the time, what is today? October 7th. I mean, right now it's been a good couple of weeks, so I can't complain there.
It's great. I like it when Bitcoin goes over 50. That makes and when Ethereum. Those are my two main investments: Ethereum and Bitcoin. And when they're doing well, I'm a pretty excited guy.
Yeah, I know. We're getting a little sidetracked, but I mean, the way I look at it is like, look, we spend a lot of money on insurance every single year in case your house burns down, right? You spend a lot of money on health insurance in case you ever get cancer. And it's like, a lot of those things never come to fruition. We're throwing away money at those every single month, no matter what. It's like, why would you not put a little bit of money, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with, into a cryptocurrency? Maybe nothing ever happens to it. Maybe it goes to zero. But like, it's just in case. That's how I look at it. Is like, we spend all this money on insurance. Why not just put, 10% of my portfolio into this asset class just in case?
So my personal investing portfolios are they're my Vegas funds, because I don't gamble. I go to Vegas pretty regularly for conferences, speaking engagements, and I've never gambled a dollar while I've been in Vegas.
Wow.
Because I'm not good at it, and it's frustrating because you lose money just hand over fist as quickly as you can put it down. At least I do. And so I don't do that, and so this is it's my Vegas money is what I call it, and if I hit it,
okay, yeah, there you go.
I lose.
Yeah, but maybe a little bit less exhilarating, but I mean, not much. I mean, the way that the volatility has been lately.
My E-Trade account is less exhilarating. My Coinbase account is pretty exhilarating because you never know what to do in the middle of the night while you're sleeping.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it never sleeps. That's the crazy part for sure. But okay, so you were saying that you were listening to these books. It's really only been the past 10 years after you started the company that you started listening to these books. What do you think was like? I mean, you probably have a bunch of books that were extremely influential. Do you have any that come to mind as like these top one or two books were like definitely the ones that changed my life or changed the trajectory of my business?
People.
Okay.
Probably the best book that anybody can read for just living. It's an amazing book on just how to get along with people, how to reframe things so that they make you more likable with your peers, with your subordinates, whatever the case may be. How to handle different situations that we all deal with on a daily basis, whether it be professionally or personally. So
that's a great. It's funny because I'm not naturally like a people person. Like, I had to work to become a little bit extroverted, and I have a tendency to be more selfish than selfless. And so I'm like reading the book, and I'm like, man, this is so good. This is so good. And I'm like, I'm explaining it to my wife, and all this stuff comes naturally to her. She's just like, yeah, like she's like that. Obviously, like why wouldn't you do that? And like sure enough, like she's already doing all these things like in her job with all her friends like every single day, just like everything straight out of the book. She's like, well, yeah, you compliment them and you lift them up. Because then it brings you over to their side. I'm like, have you read this book? It's just funny, like two extremely different personalities. But she actually did end up reading it, and she really enjoyed it. It made her become even more likable, which is hard to do. But I thought it was funny, like how different our personality traits were. So yeah, to your point, it is a great book, and I highly recommend it.
I've tried to get both of my daughters, 11 and 13, to read it. My 13-year-old has read it, and she wasn't as impressed.
Oh, really?
She wasn't as impressed with it as I was because.
Well, it's probably because Dad likes it.
Yeah, there's that, and the stories are from the early 1900s, which she just can't wrap her head around it. She's like, "That's so
That's
boring.
funny.
These stories are terrible." The book was written in the 30s, but the principles behind it still are. It's just humans. It's people, and they're never going to change. So I think it's a great book. Another one that I read, on occasion. Most of the books that I read, the ones that I really enjoy, I'll read them a couple times over a couple-year period. But Zig Ziglar, he is absolutely amazing. I love listening to him speak. I love his accent. He tickles me when he speaks because he's just so funny. But his is also not just about sales, but It's about how to treat people, how to make your business more successful by putting in the work. And his big thing is you can get everything in life as long as you're helping other people get what they want in life. And so it's really a how to live your life type of book with a whole bunch of great sales tips in it along the way.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know if I've ever actually read an entire book of his, but I'm very familiar with this content. Like, he has a lot of great stuff, a lot of great CDs that I've listened to, from back in the back in the day.
A lot of copycats of Zig Ziglar stuff over the years.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so and I'm sure we could talk about different books and how they influence us for hours, but I think those are two great ones. I'll put those in the show notes for everybody listening. So, all right, now on the timeline, you're kind of coming to the end of your sales career. And is that when you decided to open 7 to 7? Like, because that's a pretty interesting jump to go from being AT&T to a dental support organization.
So I didn't jump from AT&T into this. So this didn't start until 2008, and I started working professionally for AT&T in 2000. So I've got a few years in there that I did other things. So I worked at AT&T, and like I said, I didn't really care for my boss that much, but you learn a lot about how things work. You learn, I made a lot of contacts with business contacts, my customers, things like that. And then I went to work for a competitor of theirs after I left AT&T and worked for them for about 4 years. There was a company called Telecom, and that was a much different experience. So AT&T was more of an account manager. Here's your group of accounts, now grow them. And Telecom was the city. The city is your oyster. Go, eat what you kill type of an environment. And there's other salespeople in the office, and it could be cutthroat at times. And I was still very young, and I was working with individuals much older than I was, and it took me a couple of years to kind of find my stride there. But I was with the company for about 4 years, and in the last 2 years that I was there, I was one of the top salespeople in the country.
Oh, congrats!
Doing
That's awesome.
Really, really well. I was 27 at the time, and I was making well over six figures and living a very comfortable life. And I went to my boss, who was a really good friend of mine, my sales manager, one day, and handed him my resignation, and he looked at me like I was absolutely out of my mind. And I told him I wasn't built to do telecommunications, and I can't continue to do this, or I'll be here for the rest of my life. And he respectfully said, "I get it." and I stuck around for another month and transitioned all my accounts over to other salespeople. Did personal meet and greets with my clients and handed them over. Did that trust transfer, and then went to work for a small medical device distribution company in San Antonio selling spinal implants. So my life went from telecommunications, dealing with IT nerds, to dealing with neurosurgeons overnight, and that was actually quite rewarding. But I think the most that I learned from that company was because it was a small distribution company, and the guy that owned it was very hands-off. He was at the lake most of the time, so I was actually running his company for him, which I had no problems with. Actually, enjoyed the autonomy, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. I spent a lot of time in the OR, spent a lot of time with the neurosurgeons, and getting to learn them. They're a quirky bunch, but overall pretty easy to deal with. And then where I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore was, although he was pretty uninvolved, he made decisions on the back end without consulting with me that ultimately made it impossible for me to increase my ability to earn. And when somebody does that to me, we're probably not going to work together much longer. And it was really at that moment in my life that I realized that I just probably wasn't going to do well working for other people moving forward, and I needed to do something on my own. And
they say that I was listening to somebody, I think it was the author of a book called Who Not How, and he was saying, like, when you trace it down to entrepreneurs and what really drives them, like, money is important, and people care about status, of course, and all that sort of stuff, but really it's the freedom. It's like the freedom that really is the reason why people, it's like why you work 80 hours a week to avoid 40 hours a week, right? But you want the ability to control that. If you want to work 80 hours a week and be rewarded for that, or 120 hours a week, you want to receive all the upside of that reward, versus at the same time, if you want to take off a week and work 20 hours or 15 hours, right? Like you may or may not ever do that, but you want to be the one in control of that. And it sounds like that was happening here, is you're realizing that you weren't in control as long as you're working for somebody else.
Exactly. Even though I had a tremendous amount of autonomy, I was, I say autonomy, but I didn't have much freedom. If that makes sense. Autonomy in the way that I ran my day, but I didn't have much freedom because I was really the only person doing anything. And so I was at beck and call to the doctors. I was at beck and call to him when he wanted something, but I didn't have any actual power to make decisions on behalf of the company.
And no time freedom. Your time was all taken up.
So it was at that point that I realized that I probably wasn't going to continue to be a very good employee for other people, because ultimately I needed to do something on my own. And I didn't actually know at the time it was going to be dentistry either. I just knew that I needed to do something else. And so, we
because even medical sales to dentistry is still kind of a big jump.
It is. What I think I learned most in that is dealing with doctors. So it's just a different doctor. So in medicine and dentistry, no matter what it is, there tends to be some pretty lofty egos that you have to learn how to work with. And so that was my whole thing when I finally decided dentistry was the direction. I was like, man, if I can deal with neurosurgeons, I can certainly deal with dentists. And it's funny, I think dentists are more challenging to work with than the neurosurgeons were, to be honest.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, but I was sitting in the backyard of one of my buddy's houses, and this is actually where it all started. He's a dentist. He had his own dental practice, just a single solo practitioner, and we were sitting in his backyard having a beer, and he was just complaining, just left and right, up and down, about how much he hated it. Not necessarily doing dentistry; he hated running his business, because
like the business side of things.
Yeah, you're the dentist, the producer, you're the all things to all people all the time, and that's not his personality at all. He's more of a, hey, let's go to the beach and hang out kind of guy. So I was complaining about what I was doing and how my boss was limiting my ability to earn. And I just said, hey, let's do something. And I said, we're a couple smart guys, and he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know, dentistry sounds like a pretty good gig. But I think we can do it better. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, I don't know, give me a couple of weeks. So I wrote a business plan for the 7-to-7 model, which it was kind of the antithesis of everything I had experienced in medicine and dentistry up to that point. It was, we're going to be the exact opposite of everything I've experienced. And most of it came down to much greater access and a totally different customer experience. And so that was my business model. And went to him and said, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, whatever. So that was probably number one, that he wasn't going to be a very great business partner with.
Let's talk a little bit about the customer experience. Like, what do you mean when you say totally different customer experience? What did you not like, and then how did you fit that into the business plan?
Okay, so when you go to the doctor and you walk up to the counter, and the receptionist acts like you're not even there and tell you, like, I'm here, hello, and then they look up at you like you're an interruption to their day instead of the reason for it. And and I know that anybody that's listening to this has had that experience, whether it be at a dentist, at their doctor, a surgeon's office, it doesn't matter. And also you walk up and it's a window, right, that can close. So they close themselves off from their customers. And yeah, they may be patients, but they're customers. They're the reason that entire place is open and generates revenues, because of the people in the waiting room. And then you go back and everybody's just it's just a process. They're processing people instead of making connections with people. And I never enjoyed that. I never enjoyed going to the dentist, because it always seemed everything was about paperwork and just to process you through. And I always felt it was not a good feeling. I never enjoyed it. And even at my friend's practice, it was kind of the same way. And so me being in sales and background in customer service, I was like, this is going to be easy. It's not going to take much to win in this game. And another thing is, I mean, think about your doctor. They're open until 5 o'clock. The average dentist is open until 5 o'clock. Monday through Thursday, they're open until 5 o'clock. And good luck getting an appointment even close to when you're not working. And so that was another thing to me, is looking at it going, I'm guessing that the majority of the people that actually go to the doctor and dentist are employed, and they're going because they have insurance benefits, and the American dream, working 8 to 5 and having weekends off. That's most people. And so every professional, everybody in the medical profession is, you come see me when I want to see you, not come see me when you're available. And so that was a big piece of it. And so kind of changing that paradigm of be available, meet the patients where they are, instead of making the patients meet you where you want to meet them. And I think that kind of sparks the customer experiences, is letting them come in after work, before work, Saturdays, Sundays, things like that. So that's really where our business model came from.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, obviously that's the name, 7 to 7.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you came up with this business model, like, to be more convenient for the patients, which is huge. This was in 2008, or was this earlier?
Well, I did the business plan in 2007, early 2007.
Okay. And so it sounds like you tried to start it with this partner. How long did that last for?
Well, so I started it. I say started. I mean, we were partners, but and the reason that I had to have a dentist to do this. So
yeah.
In certain states you don't have to, but in Texas you've got to have a dentist on the professional corporation. And so we started off, and he kept his practice. I wanted to make sure that we didn't roll his organization into ours, because I didn't want to have to re-indoctrinate his team with new philosophies. I wanted to build that from scratch. So he kept his practice, and I started this one using his license, and he would come over and work about a half a day a week. But other than that, I was pretty much kind of running it. So I hired associate doctors to come work with us, and that was challenging because I had no run rate, no history, no proof of concept, nothing. It was just, hey, trust me.
And where'd you get the money from? Did you take on bank debt, or did you have personal savings that you just bootstrapped it?
No, we took on bank debt. So we borrowed. It was $750,000 to open our first office. And
okay. And when you say we, you and this doctor were 50-50 partners?
We were.
Or was it structured different? Okay.
So
you borrowed $750,000. Then you went out and you started hiring associates. And was this all in San Antonio?
It was, yes.
Okay.
So hiring associate dentists was a tough thing because we had really no history. We had no history. We had no proof of concept. It was just trust me, this is going to be big, and come along for the ride. And it wasn't really hard hiring employees. I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for people that had great personalities, great attitudes. Obviously, along the way, I've learned more in hiring, but I found some really good people that wanted to work with me, and the doctors was the hardest part. And I did that. I was all things to all people. I managed the office. I learned all the things about dentistry that I didn't have any idea about. I learned insurance that I had absolutely no idea about. I learned about submitting claims. I learned about verifying insurance benefits. But what I was really good at is I was able to take my sales experience, my sales skills, and really transition that into a much better approach to presenting dentistry to patients. And so early on, we were very good at getting patients to accept the dentistry that we were presenting to them.
Yeah, that's important.
And because it doesn't matter.
It's called case acceptance rate, right?
Exactly. And so I found that was the most comfortable thing for me, was talking to patients about their dentistry and getting them to move forward with it by helping them understand it better than the doctor could. Because unfortunately, a lot of dentists, they like to use a lot of big words that people don't understand to prove how smart they are, and that doesn't resonate with 99% of the population. It's not that the patients can't comprehend; they don't know that field. So I was what what I was able to do is I learned a tremendous amount about dentistry on my own. I asked any doctor that would take some time to talk to me about procedures, and I learned and I put them into layman's terms. So when I was talking to patients, so my case acceptance part was the most fun that I had, but also building that. So I did that for 3 years, where I was pretty much all things to all people. And like I said, Brian was maybe half a day a week that he would come in, and that was about the only time that we ever talked about anything, because he was very not involved in the business. And
You just, yeah, it was a necessity to have to use that like that doctor certification in order to be legal. So no, I totally get it. Real quick though, I want to talk about the real estate component of it, because I know that you guys are primarily or exclusively retail right now, which is really smart. What about back then? Because this is 2008, so this is like kind of before the dental industry really started focusing on really good site selection. I mean, this would have been like the early stages of like Heartland and PDS and Aspen, right? I mean, what was your real estate strategy at the time?
Find a space. it was
just find anything.
It was about like that. But no, actually, because I do have an advertising and marketing background, one of the things that I know that I knew that I needed something that people could see. And my entire life, every time I went to a doctor or dentist, it was either on the third floor of a 5 or 6 story building with no signage, or in a professional center where there was no signage. And I hated that when you go in and you've got 5 quadplexes, and they all look the same, and before you know it, you have no idea where you are trying to find your dentist.
Yeah.
And that did not make any sense to me whatsoever. It's like, why would you do that? So my first site was actually very strategic. I looked at a bunch of places, and there was this. It's a very average tan strip center, the tan strip center, and it was very unique. And the reason I liked it was because our outer loop in San Antonio is Loop 1604, but it wasn't a complete loop. And it was very interesting right past Bandera Road, because our office is a little bit west of Bandera Road. But people would come from this part of town to where they lived over here, and the loop stopped right there past Bandera, and it would force them off onto a feeder road. And my building was right at the stoplight at the intersection of that feeder road. So everyone that was on the highway just blowing by everything, I had a captive audience at the end of the day when people are off work and I'm still open. And so for the first 2 years, I didn't do any marketing except I had a 10 by 5 banner that I switched out quarterly, basically with different things, but it said, "Hey, we're open, come in." That's pretty much all it said. And
was there a lot of walk-ins?
Well, a lot of people didn't walk in, but we had our phone number, so people would literally call, and I'd pick up the phone, and they said, "Hey, I'm sitting in traffic outside of your office. I'd like to schedule an appointment." Perfect. Let's get that done. And so we were seeing without a dollar of marketing, with the exception of the $200 banner that I would buy to put on that frame. We were seeing about 125 to 150 new patients per month in that 6-chair space that we had.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, you did so many things right, like just right at the beginning. A lot of stuff that we have to coach and kind of explain to people for them to understand it and for the light bulb to go off. But because, like you said, you didn't do any marketing for 2 years, which is awesome. And when you think about it, if you are not in that retail spot, if you're not in a good spot where that's a drive through or a drive to instead of a drive through, or if it's got good anchor tenants or whatever, like at some point you're going to get bottlenecked with your amount of patients, right? You're going to have to do word of mouth is great. It can only go so far. So then what do, right? You're going to have to start digital advertising or print advertising. And those, you're competing against a lot of other people. It becomes a bidding platform with digital marketing, which is, I mean, I think it's great, don't get me wrong, but it can be very expensive. So when you look at your rent as a factor of your marketing, then you can start to really understand, hey, how much can I afford to pay? Like, how many new patients do I expect to get? And how much is my cost of acquisition per new patient, right? And a lot of times it's just much, much, much cheaper when you look at it through that lens to have a really prominent location, because it can be scary, like going an extra $10 a square foot a year, like, for an extra you got an extra 1,000 square feet or an extra two, like or 2,000, if you have 2,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet, I mean, really that could be 30 grand a year, right? But if it's going to get you a lot more patients and it's going to save you digital marketing, then you can really start to become more profitable as a practice.
Yeah, having a prominent visibility, sight sign, all that stuff that people can see from the major roads, and I'm not necessarily talking highways. I'm just talking about thoroughfares where lots of traffic pass through, being the first thing they see. And I always get my signs as big as the city and the building owner will allow, and big and bright, and
Yeah.
just getting everyone's attention. So.
Yeah. So you said you were here for 3 years or 2 years. How long was it before you opened up your second one?
So it was 2011 when we opened our second office.
Okay. So you really learned it. Like you really tried to learn everything.
I was in it. I mean,
And that's smart. I think a lot of times we try and run before we can walk. So it sounds like you really tried to make sure you knew all the processes. What do you think was like the most surprising thing that you learned, or like the biggest kind of failure that turned into a learning experience is starting that first one?
that that insurance doesn't really care about us. I guess I don't know why.
Yeah, trying to get paid.
I don't know why I thought any different than that, but I did. I thought we were going to be more in a partnership where, we take care of their customers, hence our patients. I'm an in-network provider for them, and I submit what we did for their patients, and they pay us for it. And I found out real quick that there's more fine print with everything you do with an insurance company than there is big print. And I learned real quick that they are basically criminals in disguise of an insurance company. And so you have to figure out ways to, and because you can't not play in that sandbox, but you just have to figure out how to not play right in the middle of it, how to keep right on the very, very edge, work your way through it, and do everything you can to keep that relationship as far but as close as you can together, right? So that was probably the toughest one, is understanding that we were not in this together at all.
Okay, so when did you, like, what made you finally decide now it's time to open up location 2?
I was actually getting a little bored being an
That's
office
a good thing.
manager, and it was, I wasn't at first because I was learning so much, and I was putting processes together. I was putting how we were going to manage everything that happened in our office. So any position that we had, I was putting processes so that it could be replicable for the next person that comes in, and I got all of that done, and then it got to the point where I had a really good team working with me, and I was able to kind of delegate a lot of the things that I was doing to these other great people that were working with me. And I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? I'm super bored. I come in and I'm just looking for stuff to do because I've got these great people doing it and taking a lot of it off my plate. So I was like, okay. I never got into this with the idea of having one practice. Obviously, that doesn't make sense financially.
Yeah.
Me not being a producer myself. And so the next office, a second gen or a first gen dental practice that they had moved out. It was already plumbed and ready to go.
That's sweet.
It was a sweet opportunity to get into, and so I used the stretching mentality when I opened that office. Have you read that book, Stretch? It's Dan Sorensen.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's a great book. Speaking of books, but got a space. It was mostly finished out. I had to, the previous dentist spared all expenses when he built that place, so it needed some help, but it was still a lot cheaper than a ground up finish out.
Right.
But they hadn't been in there for a few years, so the space had been empty for a while. So we had to do some stuff, put a little money into it, and then I bought all used equipment. I found a practice in Dallas that moved to a new space, bought new equipment. I drove to Dallas with a couple of buddies, and we wrapped up all the equipment and loaded it into a U-Haul and
Nice.
brought it back to San Antonio. And we got that office started in pretty short order for a really reasonable amount of money. And it was at that time that I recognized that I was going to need to have a clinical professional partner that was not my current partner.
Yeah, somebody more involved.
Somebody more involved and that actually cared about what was happening in our business, and because he was really great. I could plant seeds to get things going with our dentists, and then he could come in with one thing and just ruin everything that I'd put together for months. And So I had an associate that had been working for me. She joined us from Las Vegas in 2009 as an associate. In 2011, she was actually getting ready to resign and move to Dallas to open a practice. And I talked her into just staying here and joining us. And she bought in at that time, so we were third partners. And it was actually with her money that we used her money which she bought in with to open our second office. So that was free and clear when we opened it, which is very nice.
Wow, that's cool.
And she and I did this together. We did it together until 2011. Or in 2011, I actually forced my first partner to sell his practice because we were in that kind of growth mode now, and I wasn't going to continue to work at a reduced pay while building equity for him, while he continued to run his practice over here and do whatever he wanted to. So he wasn't
spend his time at the beach.
Exactly. So he wasn't too keen on that, but we got that done, and which after it was all said and done, he was very happy because he had a bunch of money in his pocket, and then came to work for us where he didn't have to do all the things he hated doing, which is
cool. That's awesome. You didn't burn that bridge. So many times you just hear sad stories about friendships lost. So it was cool you were able to reconcile.
Yeah. And so he continued to work with us, and then from there in 2012, I guess it was, after we'd gotten the second office up and going, we went back and we expanded our first office and we went from 6 chairs to 14 chairs and continued to grow that one. And then in 2014, we opened our third office, and it's in a small town. It's kind of San Antonio proverb. It's a town it's an incorporated city outside of San Antonio called Cibolo. And we were the third business on that major road that was right there. It was a gas station, a Sonic, and us. And so I was kind of nervous about it, but when I saw the space, it was not a build. There wasn't a building. There was just dirt when I saw it the first time. But I saw how many houses they were building out there, and that's all I cared about. And because I don't care about other businesses. I only care about rooftops. And where there weren't rooftops, they were building them. And I was like, this is going to be good. And it ends up being, it's one of my larger practices now in terms of revenue.
Wow.
And then,
were you feeling like, in the dental space, I know there's that phrase, the dark tunnel, where it's like you can get to one because it's easy to get funding for. 2, you kind of got to bootstrap it a little bit more sometimes. But then, between 3 and 8 or 9, it's hard. It's hard to get financing to secure these locations because the bank wants a proven model. And, they consider a proven model after you get out, like, when you have 8+ locations. And so sounds like you're on the other side of that right now, but did you feel like at that time you were going through it? Like, what was that experience like?
No doubt. It was tough because I was trying to figure out how to get capital for the third office, and it's weird because there is a threshold, and it wasn't 8 for me, it was less than that, but that third office, they're looking at us going, well, who's going to work in that office? If the doctors that own it work here, who's going to work there? And I said, well, it's an associate-driven model, so it will be other dentists that don't own the practice. And they're like, yeah, but who's going to work there? And I'm like, are we kidding here? I mean, it's like, they don't understand, obviously. And at the time, I don't think that they actually did, because they were really good at loaning money to one practice, writing a check for $500,000 or $1 million to a DDS or a DMD. And you start adding additional sites to that, it didn't really make sense to them, because at that time, the only other offices that people had, they were referred to as satellite offices, and that was the doctor splits time between one office and the next. Mm-hmm. Not both offices are open full time with other people working in them. And so that was challenging, but we got it done. And then the fourth one is where it got even more challenging, and I had to ditch the bank that I was with, and I found another bank at that time. It was Pacific Continental, and they were starting their healthcare division and really kind of liked what was in our model. So they took a chance on us, gave us a few bucks, and we were able to open that fourth office.
Oh, that's cool. And so was it like at this point, between then, like your fourth office to you've got 8 now, did it become a little bit more cookie cutter for you guys? Like that you kind of figure out your processes and your systems?
Oh, it was, so the first office was hard. And I tell people this all the time that are thinking about doing their second office. It's like the first office is hard, but it's different hard, because the reason it's hard is because you're learning things for the first time, and you're but you're in it completely, 100%. So you're watching and monitoring and able to make those quick changes that you see aren't happening correctly. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, it's quite frustrating. But the second office, I tell people, is exponentially more challenging than the first. Because while you're trying to get your second office going, your first office starts to slip. And so you're over here trying to do this, and, this office over here, the old phrase, when the cat's away, the mice will play, and that's kind of what happens. Even though you've got good people that are doing most things right, they're not doing all things right, and they're not manning the ship all the time. And then I had an office manager at the time that felt it was her responsibility to steal from me while I was gone. So that was fun.
Oh, wow.
we caught it pretty early. One of my other employees actually cued me in on it, which was very nice of her to do. But we got rid of her. But the second office was really hard. The third office became easier, and now opening an office is just clockwork. I've got a designer that I give her the dimensions of the space. She knows exactly what I'm looking for in operatory numbers. She knows exactly what I'm looking for in operatory size. She knows exactly what I'm looking for in my administrative areas. So we don't even have to go through this process. She sends me prelim drawings. I'll say, move this, do this, move this around. I want to see this a little bit different. She'll send me a second prelim, a little bit more wiggle room, and then she'll find, usually within the third rendition, we've got exactly what we want it to look like. I use the same contractors. Every office is painted the same. I use the same carpet, same finishes, same everything. And so, we don't have to go through this 3 or 4 month process of me going, well, I kind of like this light, and maybe this faucet, or maybe a different carpet. I want everything to be universal or uniform across the organization. So for us to build a space is very, very easy for us.
What square footage are you guys occupying?
So it depends on the office. Our first one is 6,200 square feet now, and it's got 23 chairs.
Oh.
That was the one that started. We started
pretty
with
big.
4, and it's at 23 chairs now. Our second
Wow.
office, it was 6 chairs, but we moved in 2008 to a new space about 2 miles down the road, and it's 4,000 square feet and 12 chairs. Our third office is 4,400 square feet and 15 chairs. Our fourth office is 3,512 chairs. Fifth office is 8 chairs, and sixth office is 10 and 3,500 square feet. Seventh is 3,510 operatories, and the one we're building right now is 4,800 square feet and 16 chairs.
Nice. Okay, so I have like a 2-pronged question. First of all, where do you see the economy going from here, right? And there's things like inflation, which is crazy. I mean, we've printed 30% of the entire money supply in the last 18 months. We've got that's driving up labor prices. You're fighting Medicare, Medicaid, like you said, at the same time, which they don't want to increase their prices. So your costs are going up, but your revenue is stuck here. Then the cost of lumber was high for a while. That's lowered, but you've got other things like other materials. And so building out and real estate and rent is all going up as well at the same time. But you've also, what about you personally? And for 7 to 7, one question is, where do you see the economy going? And then what's your plan for future growth, and how do you plan to combat all that?
This is a really tricky question because it's new to so many people. And even in San Antonio, where housing prices have probably been some of the lowest in the nation for the longest time, we have an inventory crisis right now for so many people trying to move in here, and houses that would sell for $125,000 last year are selling for almost $300,000+ this year. So
wow, it's kind of like Orlando. Yeah, we're seeing kind of like similar price movements as well.
Exactly. So it's insane. And now, and then as far as the labor shortage, I honestly don't know where everybody went. I mean, it's like they just vaporized. They're not giving out any more money, as far as I can see.
Right.
So I don't know why these people.
Maybe they all bought Bitcoin. They're millionaires now.
Bitcoin millionaires. Yeah, exactly. But so one of the things that we did to kind of counteract this was we actually gave to our clinical team, our assistants, and primarily clinical assistants, which we have about 90 of them, 95. we gave about $700,000 worth of annual raises across the board to them, and then we gave about another $250,000 of annual raises to all of our administrative team. So
Wow, that's
that
great.
hurts, right? When
Yeah.
like you said, the insurance companies,
$1,000,000.
all they want to do is continue to reel in how much they pay you out for your reimbursements on services, and they want to lower that while everything else is going up in cost. A perfect example of cost increases, nitrile gloves, right? The gloves that we use to see patients, nitrile exam gloves. It's the same gloves that they use to give the vaccine. And so the access to those, and I would say 90% of the gloves worldwide are made in one part of the world. And so the cost of our gloves, we used to be able to buy a box of 300 gloves for about $6 or $8, and now we buy 100 boxes of gloves for $19. And so they've gone up 1,200% since COVID started, but we still need to use the same amount. So that's just one example of our supply costs going up, and even access to those gloves has gotten limited as well. Even trying to procure them is tough. So everything that's happening to us, our costs are going up, and our reimbursements are staying the exact same, like you said. So what we're doing right now is our entire conversation organizationally over the last 4 months has been resource utilization, and that's from human capital to our actual supplies that we have in the office, and maximizing every single thing that we have. We're consolidating groups of people so that we can reduce the number of people that we have to do certain jobs. We're cross-training more people so that we can have not just very specific individuals, they can do more things and maximize their time while working. We're trying to figure out exactly how to make all of this work right now, because I think it's a problem that so many people run into. I know contractors' margins are going to the floor, trying to get work, because going back to something like, for me, I build a space that's 3,500 square feet one year, and the next year that I build another one, it went up 25% total for the finish up, because the access to the HVAC, contractors, laborers, building materials, everything went up, and even the trades, they're refusing to come to work for less than, they're increasing the wage just to show up at your space. So we're just in the beginning of it for ourselves in terms of how much this is affecting us. But as far as the economy goes, geez, I have no idea. I don't know how you can print billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars and not expect something pretty.
I think it was trillions, right? They don't print trillions.
I didn't mean billions. I'm sorry. I used
okay.
Yeah. Billions. Yeah, trillions.
I know, it's funny when billions don't sound like very much anymore,
right.
Huh?
It sounds like it's pocket change, but yeah, when they're printing tens of trillions of dollars and with nothing to back it up, I mean, what does that do to the value of the dollar? And so I'm kind of nervous about what next year looks like from a taxation purpose, especially from capital gains, from income tax, for different tax brackets. I'm really concerned with what it's going to look like, what it's going to do to people and their spending habits. Interest rates are likely going to start climbing pretty quickly, because they've been at 10-year low for right now. So interest rates are going to start to climb. I think spending will be down significantly over what it was last year, while they were just doing money handouts, all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to. We're trying to figure out how to stockpile as much cash as we can, not necessarily knowing what's going to happen next year.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it is funny that the public mandate of the Federal Reserve is to grow inflation by 2% a year, because I don't know that there's really a good argument for inflation or good reason for inflation, aside from the fact that it gives the federal government the ability to depreciate the massive amounts of debts that they owe. And so it's like one of those, it's like a lie in plain sight, right? Like it's like one of the things you say it up front. It's like, yeah, it's our mandate is to grow by 2% a year, and everybody just accepts it. Okay, cool. Yeah, 2% a year sounds good. But I mean, really what it is it's stealing from the working class, or people who are savers, 2% per year, compounding of their money, yep. Right? Like eventually that adds up to a lot. That's why Coke was 5 cents in 1920. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether or not we agree with it, because there's a saying in the investing world, don't fight the Fed. So the question is, what are they doing with it, and how can we best position ourselves to be prepared for any situation? So personally, that's why, I like real estate. Unfortunately, it does seem like it's overpriced right now. But as a long-term hold, it's inversely correlated with the dollar, because you're buying an asset that is going to go up in value, and then when you're using debt, well, the more debt you take on and the more inflation happens, you're playing the same game as the federal government at that point, and your debt is going to be worth less and less, right? Is your debt, your mortgage on your building, is it going to be more painful to pay that off today or pay off that same amount in 30 years? It's obviously going to be a lot less painful 30 years from now. So that's why we like real estate. That's one of our hedge of protections against inflation. But yeah, even that is hard right now, because it's not it's not a secret. Everybody knows it. That's why it's so competitive, to get invested in real estate. So I don't have the answers. I don't know. I know that if you continue, like we talked about the compound effect earlier, if you continue to do the right things, you continue to take one step at a time in the right direction, long term it's going to play out. But yeah, it might be kind of shaky, it might be kind of dicey over the next couple of years. I don't know.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more. I think certain industries are going to continue to have no problem growing, even in certain economies. But I think more retail oriented, where there's a lot of consumer money has to be put into their needs. Dentistry is one of those, because dental insurance covers very little, so the consumer ends up paying quite a bit out of pocket. So it could be a little dicey for dentistry in terms of people coming in and getting the stuff that their insurance pays for and nothing else for some time. But the good thing is there's lots of work, and I just kind of wish some of the people would go to get it. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
So we may, after this newest office, we may hold off for a minute. I don't really know what we're going to do, but the one thing that I do know that we're trying to accomplish is we want to have as much cash in reserve as we can going into next year, just in case, those reserves.
Just to be prepared. Yeah. Well, man, this has been great. Justin, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being generous with not only your time, but also your strategies and stuff like that. And I really appreciate it. Looking forward to hopefully getting to see you here in person at one of these events coming up.
Sounds great. Thanks, Austin. Appreciate your time.